Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. My guest today is Kenneth Bae. He spent 2 years in a North Korean labor camp. It's the longest time served by U.S. citizens since the Korea War back in the early 1950s. He was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor for allegedly attempting to overthrow the regime by spreading religious text. The Christian missionary was eventually freed in November 2014 thanks to the efforts of the Obama administration. He then wrote a memoir about his ordeal called Not Forgotten, the True Story of My Imprisonment in North Korea. He has now moved to South Korea, where he is running an NGO helping defectors from the North. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Bae, before your arrest, you were running a company in China organizing tourist visits to North Korea. But on one of those tours, you made what you have described as a big mistake. Can you tell us more about the circumstances of your arrest in North Korea?
Yes, when I was working in China, I brought tourists into the countries. I had a tour company, and my purpose was bringing Christian tourists into country to see the land and pray and worship and love the people there. And then one of the trips, the last trip that I took people in, I brought in computer hard drive, external hard drive as mistakes. And when I realized it was too late, and then this hard drive contained Western media documentary film of North Korea. And this is why I was detained. And they was wondering why I brought in such a hostile material into the countries. And later on, they discovered that I was a missionary and pastor. I brought people to pray and worship, and they decided to charge me against that. And they said I was trying to overthrow the government by bringing people to pray for the people in North Korea.
Do you sense, because obviously you had interactions with the North Korean to be able to go in, do they suspect that you were doing missionary work or not at all?
Well, within the first year and a half, I brought in more than 300 people over 23 different trips. So they had an idea that everybody I brought in, they were Christians. So they were okay with that. But once they discovered the hard drive, and they decided to use it against me, and then they found a way to use it for different purpose, as a political bargaining chip at the end.
Right. So you spent 735 days in captivity. Obviously, those were very hard conditions. You suffered physically. You lost weight. Tell us very briefly about how your daily life was there in this hard labor camp in North Korea.
I was sent to the North Korean labor camp for foreigners only. I was the only prisoner there for the whole time. There are more than 30 to 40 guards that were there. I have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I have to work outside from 8 o'clock in the morning until 6 p.m. every day for 6 days a week. I have to carry rock and digging the hole, shoveling the coal, and just many different type of hard labor I have to endure. So at the end of the day, I couldn't move. My back and leg was hurting, and it was very difficult to sleep with the light on. And I was bitten by mosquitoes, and just very difficult, just challenges that I had, just to living day by day, hoping that, the U.S. and the governments would intervene and trying to get me home.
Were you tortured or beaten, or was it just the conditions you described that were the most difficult part of it?
Yes, I was not tortured or beaten, but that I think there was a part, one of the prosecutors came to see me every week and told me that I will never go home. I have to be there for 15 years and no one remember you. Your government has abandoned you. You have to be here and pay for your crime. So that was the most difficult part to endure, more for psychological, and also just some threat was made during this time, and saying that if I don't cooperate with them, then they may charge me as a war criminal because I was American working inside North Korea, bringing a Christian towards the end, and they considered that as a threat. And they said they could just take me out on the street and just shoot without going to the trial. So I received 15 years of hard labor sentence, was sent to the labor camp, but I didn't know when I was going to be released anytime soon at the time.
That being said, from what I understand, they let you read the Bible and even have some exchanges with your family, which is, I guess, rather unusual for people in those hard labor camps.
Yes, I think they consider me as political bargaining chips, and then because I was cooperating with their what they're doing, and they decided to show a little bit of mercy for me to be able to exchange letters with my family members, and I also received more than 300 letters from the people around the world that didn't know. They sent me the letter and saying that, Kenneth, we are with you. You have not been forgotten. We are praying for you. So these are the extraordinary circumstances I was actually in, because I realized after got home, for other detainees, that wasn't the case for them, most of them.
Right. So can you recount when you were brought out? Was it a total surprise that the head of the U.S. intelligence suddenly came to get you in November 2014?
Yes, November 3rd, 2014, it was a total surprise, and I was hoping that something would happen soon. But the last month, during the leading into November, was most difficult because prosecutor made sure that I was discouraged, that I would not have a hope to going home. But seeing the U.S. envoy, and then knowing that I actually going home, it was a total surprise, and I was pretty much just saying that finally, after 735 days, I get to go home.
Right. So you mentioned the fact that you were probably a bargaining chip. Do you have an idea what the U.S. gave in exchange for your freedom?
Not that I know of. And I think that what they were saying, the bargaining chip, what the media described as bargaining chip was when I was being sentenced right before the trial. The prosecutor told me that it doesn't matter how many years I will receive at the trial, because sooner or later they will have a negotiation with the U.S. governments, and then the U.S. governments will bring me home. So therefore, they said it doesn't matter what you're gonna get at the trial. So just hang on, and then you go through with it, and then soon you'll go home. I think that's when I realized that I wasn't there to pay for my crime, but I was there as a political bargaining chip.
Right. Obviously, to get briefly to the current situation, we've seen worsening of the relation. We've seen a U.S. student, Otto Warmbier, who was arrested for allegedly stealing a propaganda poster, sent back to the U.S. in a coma. He died a few weeks later. We've seen the tough exchanges between the U.S. president, the North Korean ruler. Are you concerned that war is possible, or are you hopeful that something can be done to avoid this outcome?
I think the war is definitely possible at this point. So I as an American and also Korean Americans, I do not want to see any war break out in Korean Peninsula anytime soon. So I think the U.S. governments and the South Korean governments and other nations are trying to do everything possible to prevent the war to happen and to see alternative solution with dealing with the North Korean authorities. But I'm afraid that North Korean governments will never give up the nuclear program for exchange for peace or anything else at this point. So I am asking people around the world to pray for the people in North Korea and South Korea as well. Because I do believe the power of prayer really got me home. So I'm asking people to remember and stand and pray for the people in North Korea.
I mean, would you ever consider going back to North Korea? As I said, you're working on an NGO tending to people coming from there. Is this something that could be done? We know the South Korean government is trying to find a peaceful solution. Do you see yourself, or what you lived there was too much of a nightmare to ever think of going back?
I moved to South Korea 2016, hoping that someday I will be able to return back to North Korea. Not under present circumstances, I don't think it's possible. But I'm hoping for Korean unification will take place in sometime soon, and one way or the others. And when that happens, I would love to be one of the first one to actually go to North Korea and start helping the people inside. And that's my hope and prayer.
Okay, Kenneth Bae, thank you very much for your testimony, and thank you for watching this edition of The Interview here on France 24.